Hi everyone, it is Fitz with your daily delivery. Hope you are well. I am quite good. I really thought the portal would be more busy for Kansas State, going and coming, like players leaving, players coming in. But here we are, and it's pretty silent. And it might be because Kansas State's approach on the football side to the NIL works pretty darn well for them, although it does have some flaws to it, and I'll explain in a second. Please remember to subscribe to this YouTube channel. We appreciate your ongoing support. We continue to grow. The views keep going up because you keep feeding that algorithm with subscriptions, comments, and likes. Thank you so much. So Kansas State does something really interesting with its NIL on the football side. We know about the basketball side. They've got a big NIL budget. They go out and find players. Go out and find the best players that they can get to Kansas State. That can be done with a 13-man roster. It's a little more difficult when you're trying to put together a 105-man football roster. So you have to be a bit more selective. Now, some schools do go out and find that special player, most notably quarterbacks, and give them a lot of money to come to their school to solve a problem. They're short on a quarterback. They need someone to bridge the gap between what they have now and a young quarterback that isn't quite ready to play. And they'll go find that special player at other positions too. But the NIL market for football is not quite the same. The SEC probably offers a lot of money, and maybe the Big Ten's doing it now. I saw that Carver Willis, former K-State offensive lineman, is going to end up in the Big Ten at Washington, and congratulations to him. But for the most part, Kansas State takes its football NIL budget and aims it inward, or around the state of Kansas. Let me explain that. If players prove themselves in the Kansas State system, they're going to see their NIL go up. And I know that's a theory that is held at a lot of schools, but really when you get into that school, they're using their money to find the next guy, not necessarily you. K-State wants to keep the players that have been successful and worked well in their program and elevate their numbers so they don't go into the portal. So basically when you're seeing someone go into the portal from Kansas State, well, they either didn't want them or they couldn't pay them what they thought they were worth. And sometimes what they think they are worth is from the discussions they've had with a so-called agent telling them what they're worth, and then they get them on the free market, and they find out in many cases they're not worth that. Kansas State also targets its NIL on in-state recruits of note, ones that help raise the profile of the program, but players in the state of Kansas hold more value to K-State than the schools that they might go to out of state. So while a player might get a good NIL at another school, they might be spending that money on other big-time players, and K-State might be able to match that amount at least and keep them at home. It's an interesting way to go about it. But it also creates a problem where when you have a really big need, you've kind of committed yourself not to solve it through NIL and the transfer portal. So what you see at Kansas State is they reach and find guys, and they hope that pays off. And it's been successful in some ways. Certainly the safety spot has seen some success. And in other ways, it just hasn't worked out. Kansas State had two prominent receiver transfer portal additions in the last couple of years, and neither one of them quite panned out in a way that they wanted. Now, news of Casey Concepcion, the great receiver from NC State, who we all assumed would have interest in Kansas State since his brother Nunu just signed with K-State in this recruiting class, but he doesn't. He's not even listing Kansas State anymore. And that, honestly, is probably because K-State wasn't even going to consider bringing him in, and he wasn't considering K-State because that NIL money is pointed inward. And instead, they're looking for value. That guy who maybe didn't have the right chance or was in the wrong scheme, or simply they feel like they could do better with, and bring that kid in and try to succeed with him. And honestly, that hasn't always worked. And honestly, the junior college recruiting has not been a viable way to bring in consistent talent. So Kansas State and Chris Klieman and his director of roster management, Clint Brown, are still fighting their way on this new portal NIL age. But they're managing to do a very good job with limited NIL resources that could keep them very competitive in the Big 12. But with more NIL, with a little more boost from the boosters, the big money people, Kansas State could have one of the biggest NILs in the Big 12, if not the biggest. And then, well, things could get interesting. We'll see what the future holds. There's a lot of NIL talk at Kansas State between football and basketball. And that money, well, we'll see if it moves around in future years.